She walked into the room quietly, wearing a simple dress, no makeup and shoes that had clearly seen better days. No one turned to look. In a room full of polished faces and perfect postures, she didn't stand a chance, at least, that's what everyone thought. The casting panel barely lifted their heads as she stepped onto the stage. A few whispered, some rolled their eyes. One of the assistants even chuckled under her breath. To them, she didn't fit the part. She wasn't glamorous, loud, or confident. She was just ordinary. And in a world obsessed with appearance, ordinary often gets ignored. Within seconds, she was dismissed. "Thank you, but this isn't what we're looking for," said one of the judges flatly, without even giving her a proper chance. She stood there silently for a moment, her eyes scanning the room, not with anger, but something deeper. A calm strength. Then, just as she turned to leave, she said one sentence, just one, but it changed everything. The room fell silent. Conversations stopped. Phones were lowered. Every single person, those same ones who had just dismissed her, were now frozen, stunned by what they had just heard. That one sentence carried the kind of power no makeup, no expensive clothes, no acting real ever could. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't rehearsed. It was real, and it hit them like a wave. So who was she really? What did she say that could leave a room full of seasoned professionals speechless? And why did that simple woman, overlooked by everyone, become the most talked about person in the building that day? Stay with us, because what happened next was something no one expected, and it all started with that one unforgettable line. No one saw it coming, not the casting director, not the assistants, not even the security guard by the door. They were used to big personalities, flashy entrances, people fighting to be seen. But she was the opposite. Quiet, humble, almost invisible, until she spoke. That one sentence hung in the air like a question that no one could answer. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. And it hit something deep, something personal. It was as if she had pulled back the curtain on the entire room and showed them something they had all forgotten. But before we get to that sentence, let's go back a bit. Her name was Lena. A 42-year-old single mother from a small town you've probably never heard of. She wasn't an actress by trade. In fact, this was her very first audition. She'd worked as a waitress for years, took care of her sick mother, raised 2 kids on her own. There were no fancy drama schools, no agents, no industry connections. Just a dream she had been carrying quietly since she was a girl watching old movies on a tiny secondhand TV. So why was she here? What made her suddenly get on a bus, ride for hours into the city, and walk into one of the most competitive castings of the year? The casting was for a lead role in a new drama series, a role meant for someone with a strong presence, according to the flyer. They didn't mention fame or beauty, but that's what everyone expected, everyone except Lena. She knew she didn't look like the others, and she knew they wouldn't take her seriously. But she came anyway, carrying nothing but a worn-out folder and a story she hadn't told anyone yet. A story that would soon turn everything upside down. As Lena stood there, her voice still echoing in the minds of everyone in the room, something shifted. No one dared to speak first. The casting director, known for his sharp tongue and quick decisions, suddenly looked unsure. The assistant who had scoffed earlier now avoided eye contact. Even the camera operator, who had seen thousands of auditions, had his hand frozen on the lens. Whatever Lena said, it wasn't part of any script. It wasn't rehearsed, but it had hit a nerve that no one expected. Behind the scenes, things got tense. Whispers started spreading through the hallways. Who is she? Did you hear what she said? Why isn't she on the list? Producers were being called in. Some argued she broke protocol. Others said she deserved a second look. The atmosphere changed from boredom to buzzing curiosity. But not everyone was rooting for her. There were a few in the room, especially those who had connections in the industry, who saw her as a threat. And nobody walking in and getting all the attention. That didn't sit well with them. Lena didn't seem fazed by the sudden attention. She sat quietly outside the audition room, her hands folded on her lap, that same worn-out folder beside her. Inside it were photos, handwritten notes, and a letter. A letter she hadn't shown anyone yet, one that explained everything: why she came, what she was hiding, and the real reason she'd have finally decided to speak after years of silence. Meanwhile, one of the producers made a quiet call. "We need to check her background," he said. "Everything." And just like that, Lena's story was no longer just about an audition. It had become something much bigger, something personal. And not everyone wanted the truth to come out. The hallway felt colder now, even though the air conditioning hadn't changed. Lena could feel eyes on her, some curious, some cold. A few of the other auditionees whispered as they passed by, their polished heels clicking against the floor. One of them muttered just loud enough, "This isn't a charity. What's she even doing here?" But Lena didn't flinch. She'd heard worse. Life had toughened her skin, but her heart remained soft, something that made her different. Inside the audition room, the team replayed the footage of her short appearance. No performance, just that one line. One sentence that cracked through the fake smiles and tired routines. It was raw, it was true. One of the producers leaned forward. "She's not acting," he said. "She's lived it." But not everyone agreed. Another argued she was too much of a risk. No experience, no following, no brand to sell. But the casting director wasn't listening to them anymore. He was staring at Lena's expression frozen on screen. There was something in her eyes, pain maybe, but also courage, the kind you can't fake. At the same time, the background check was digging deeper, and something came up. An old newspaper article, a name that didn't match. A past that Lena had never spoken of. A scandal, buried years ago, involving someone powerful, someone connected to the industry, the same someone who had just walked into the building. Lena felt it before she saw him, that familiar weight in her chest. The man who had once silenced her now stood just down the hall. His face was older, but the arrogance hadn't aged a day. He didn't recognize her, not yet, but he would. And when he did, everything would come crashing down. Lena didn't come just to audition, she came to be heard. And now she couldn't turn back. Lena kept her eyes down as the man walked past her, laughing with a producer like nothing in the world could touch him. He didn't recognize her, not yet. But she remembered every detail, his voice, the way he twisted words, and the day everything in her life had changed because of him. Back then, she'd been too scared to speak. Too alone, she had been told to stay quiet for her own good. But silence had cost her everything, her reputation, her career before it even started, and years of peace. Now, fate had brought them back under the same roof. Only this time she wasn't here to hide. But just when Lena was gathering her strength to finally step forward, something unexpected happened. A woman entered the building. Young, confident, dressed like someone important. She headed straight to the casting room with a briefcase in hand. Nobody recognized her, but Lena did. Her name was Ava, and she was Lena's daughter. Ava wasn't supposed to be there. Lena had never told her the full story. She didn't want her dragged into the past. But Ava had found the letter. The one Lena kept hidden all these years, buried in that old folder. Now she was here, not as a bystander, but as a lawyer. And not just any lawyer, one building a quiet case against the man who had once silenced her mother. Inside the room, whispers turned into full-blown arguments. Lines were being crossed. Producers argued over whether to protect their own or face the truth. Lena stood frozen, heart pounding. Her past was colliding with her present, and her daughter was standing in the middle of it. What started as a simple audition was turning into something no one had prepared for. And the real storm hadn't even started yet. Ava stepped into the casting room, calm but firm. Her voice carried across the space as she laid the file on the table. "Before this audition continues," she said, "there's something you all need to see." Heads turned. The man, the same one who had once buried Lena's dreams, froze when he heard Ava's name. Then he looked at Lena. And finally, it hit him. His smile faded. Inside the folder were documents, witness accounts, and a copy of the letter Lena had written years ago but never sent. It told the truth about how she had been silenced, threatened, and pushed out of the industry before she even had a chance. All because she had stood up against something wrong. The room was silent. Even the casting director leaned back, his hands shaking slightly as he flipped through the pages. No one had expected this. Not today. Not during a casting. Lena finally stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake. "I came here thinking I had to prove I could act. But the truth is, I've been acting all my life just to survive." There was a pause. Then quietly, someone clapped. Then another. It wasn't for a performance. It was for courage. The casting director stood. "You don't need to audition. You've already told the most powerful story we've ever heard." Just when it seemed everything had settled, the final twist came. Ava, holding her mother's hand, whispered something that only Lena heard. She had uncovered not just one story, but many. Lena wasn't the only one. Others were ready to speak too. The role Lena came to audition for, it was now being rewritten, based on her life. And in that moment, Lena realized she hadn't just taken back her voice, she had sparked something much bigger than herself weeks past, but the impact of that day didn't fade. News of Lena's story spread beyond the casting room, across social media, blogs, and eventually into national headlines. What started as a simple audition turned into a movement. People began sharing their own stories, their own silences, and slowly, the walls that had kept so many voices out of the industry began to crack. Lena didn't chase fame, but it found her anyway. Not for a role she played, but for the truth she lived. The drama series she had auditioned for, it got rewritten from the ground up. Producers decided to build the entire show around Lena's real-life journey, and this time, she wasn't cast as a background character. She was the lead, a simple woman, once overlooked, now standing center stage, not pretending, but simply being who she was. The cameras rolled not on fiction, but on something real. Her quiet strength, her heartbreak, her resilience, it all became part of the story the world was finally ready to hear. Ava stayed by her side, helping guide each step forward. Together, they formed a small foundation to support unheard voices, those who had been dismissed, silenced, or told they weren't enough. Lena never wanted revenge, she wanted truth, and she got it, in her own way. In the end, Lena's story wasn't about one moment in a casting room. It was about every person who's ever been told they don't belong. Her journey reminded us that courage doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers, waits, and then speaks when it matters most. She came in as just another face in the crowd, but she left us something no one could ignore. And all it took was one sentence.